Hello all! Happy Bionicle Day, and welcome to the Knowledge Tower, where we investigate the science behind the Bionicle legend. Bionicle Day 2024 celebrates the 20th anniversary of the 2004 storyline, where we were first introduced to the mysterious city of Metru Nui. The city contains many wondrous things, from the chutes to the knowledge towers to the archives, but no one thing in the city represented Metru Nui quite like the Coliseum. The most important building in the city by far, it dominated the landscape from its position at the very centre of Metru Nui, so much so that it became a symbol of the city itself. When you think of Metru Nui, you think of the Coliseum. However, for such an important building, we actually know surprisingly little about it. When you look up impressive buildings in our own world, you are greeted with statistics on their height, footprint, how many floors they contain, and a whole host of other key characteristics that we just don't know about the Coliseum. In this video, we are going to change that, and find out how this crowning achievement of Matoran universe architecture stacks up against its earthly rivals. Our starting point is the official map of Metru Nui, which gives us official figures for the length and width of the island. 47.6 kyo long and 24 kyo wide. A kyo is equal to 1.37 kilometers, so converting those measures to metric, we get 65.21 kilometers for the length and 32.88 kilometers for the width. Now that we know that, it's a simple matter of counting pixels to determine the size of a single pixel on the map, which we can then use to measure the size of any feature on it, like the Coliseum. Performing the pixel count, we get pixels of 20.08 meters in both length and width, each accounting for 403.21 square meters in area. Incidentally, a count of every pixel that makes up the city, thankfully able to be gained by an automated pixel count rather than having to count each one manually, gives us a total land area for the city of 911.42 square kilometers. Putting Metru Nui at around the same size as Dallas in the United States. Keep that figure in mind for later on, we will be circling back to it. The Coliseum is 105 pixels wide in this image, meaning that at full scale it is around 2.1 kilometers wide. Given that this is a circular building, we can use this equation for the area of a circle to show that it has an overall footprint of around 3.5 square kilometers, already making it larger than the largest footprints of any building constructed on Earth, with the New Century Global Center in China coming closest at a mere 1.76 square kilometers. Now that we have the width and the footprint, let's get to the real question, the height. To answer this question, we ideally want to find a picture of the Coliseum that shows its full width and height in a perfectly side-on view. However, that proved easier said than done. All the pictures I could find of the Coliseum were either side-on, but didn't show the full building, did show the full building, but showed it at an angle, or showed the full building at the right angle, but was very low resolution, which caused the edges of the building to blur into the background, making pixel measurements quite difficult. In the end, I had to settle for this image, which shows the full height and width with the least amount of distortion from the viewing angle or blurred boundaries. Not the perfect scenario, but as long as the pixel measurements taken are careful to take the viewing angle into account, then it shouldn't be a problem. Breaking out the pixel measurements again, we can see that the Coliseum is 106 pixels wide in this picture. Dividing our 2.1 kilometer width from earlier by this number, that gives us pixels of around 19.99 meters in length. Now all we need to do is count up the number of pixels from the base of the Coliseum to the top of its spires and multiply that by 19.99 meters to get our answer. That count came out at 226 pixels, meaning that the height of the Coliseum works out at an astonishing 4.5 kilometers tall. Once again, that beats any earthly skyscraper by a massive margin, with the Burj Khalifa in Dubai, the tallest building on Earth at time of writing, being only 0.83 kilometers tall. That's 5.4 times smaller than the Coliseum. To really help that sink in, if you stacked the next 6 tallest buildings on Earth on top of the Burj Khalifa to make one massive mega skyscraper, it would still be 80 meters shorter than the Coliseum. The view Taraga had over the city below from that height must have been extraordinary. You may have noticed that when measuring the height of the Coliseum, I only measured up to the top of the main set of spires here, ignoring the single longer spire here. That was partially because this spire isn't always depicted on the Coliseum, but mostly because whenever it does appear, it almost always extends out of shot, meaning that we couldn't measure its full length. The only image I could find that did include what could be its full length was this one, from Vakama's visions in Legends of Metru Nui. However, even here it's possible that this isn't actually the top of the spire, and instead it just disappears into the clouds. But, assuming that actually is the top of it, I did do some more pixel measurements on this image to figure out its potential length. This image was too blurry to use with enough confidence for the main height calculation, but performing the same pixel measures gave a result for the main building that was only 174 meters out from the previous calculation, which isn't too bad. After counting the pixels and converting to meters again, that additional spire adds another 2,065 meters to the overall height of the Coliseum, meaning that this spire alone is a little over half of the height of the rest of the building. This puts the new height of the Coliseum at around 6,580 meters, or around 6.6 kilometers tall, making it the equivalent of 7.9 times larger than the Burj Khalifa. The Burj Khalifa, unsurprisingly, also holds the record on Earth for the largest number of stories, with that building containing 163 floors above ground level. How would the Coliseum compare to that? Well, first we would need to decide how much height each floor would take up individually. While Metru Nui is primarily home to the small-statured Matoran, what few views we get of rooms in the Coliseum show that the ceilings are particularly high, far higher than even a tower and far enough off the floor that Titan species such as the Vortex can walk around without difficulty. There could of course be differences between the floors, with some having ceilings of Titan height while others are more Matoran sized, but for the sake of this video we will just be assuming all floors are the same height as each other. In my home country of the United Kingdom, ceiling heights are usually around 2.4 meters above the floor, which works out to be around 25 to 26% higher than the average male height of 1.77 meters. In order to work out what height we should set the Coliseum floors, I'm going to apply the same principle, making them around 26% taller than the expected inhabitants. I'm also going to take Rudaka as the example Titan-sized inhabitant of the Coliseum from which to base my calculations. We saw from the 2005 storyline that she can comfortably walk around in the Coliseum without issues. Plus, this next set of calculations will involve some real-world set height measurements, and Rudaka is the only Titan set from the 2004 to 2005 story years that I would not currently have to rebuild from my parts bin. Rudaka does not have a canon height, with Greg only confirming that Vortex such as herself are taller than a Rakshi but smaller than an Exo-Tower. Luckily, we do know the canon height of the average Tower, 2.19 meters, so we can work out her height via comparisons between sets. The sets of 2004 and 2005 are in the same build system, and so should be fine to use as comparisons for relative heights between them in the story itself. A Metru build tower is 20 centimeters tall, meaning that each centimeter of height corresponds to 10.95 centimeters of in-universe height. The Rudaka set, meanwhile, is 31 centimeters tall, which therefore gives her a full in-universe height of around 3.39 meters. Adding on 26% of this to her height gives us a total of 4.3 meters between the Coliseum floors, which I decided to increase to 4.5 meters to help account for the actual thickness of the floors themselves. Now all we need to do is divide our height of the Coliseum by this floor height to get the number of total floors, right? Well, not quite. Remember, the Coliseum has spires at the top, which are unlikely to contain actual floors themselves, so we need to remove these from our height calculations first. Going back to our pixel measurements from before, the Coliseum minus these spires is 196 pixels tall, meaning that the height without the spires is therefore around 3.9 kilometers. Taking that 3.9 kilometers and dividing it by our floor height of 4.5 meters, we get a final floor count for the Coliseum of 870, or around 5.3 times more than the Burj Khalifa. We could end the video there, but there is actually one more figure we can work out to round off this investigation into the Coliseum. Those 870 floors, how much potential floor space do they add up to? That is a lot of floors in a very wide building after all. The amount of storage space within the Coliseum could be truly enormous. To calculate that potential space, we need to take two key aspects of the Coliseum into account. One, the fact that the outer walls of the building are sloped, meaning that each progressive floor will have a smaller footprint than the one below. And two, the fact that a section of the building is open to the air. Let's tackle that second point first. Shots of the Aquilini field, as shown in Bionicle 2, Legends of Metru Nui, show the spires and open sky above the telescreens in the upper rim of the stadium, showing that the stadium itself is located at the very top of the main portion of the Coliseum building. This means that however many of the 870 floors that the stadium takes up will have a reduced area count, as we will only be able to count them as the space between the stadium seating and the outer wall of the building. Searching through the available shots from the movie, this shot seems to be our best bet for a measure of how tall the stadium is, with the stadium floor and the top of the outer wall being visible and with only minimal distortions due to perspective. Measuring that height comes out to 1089 pixels. If we can find something of a known height within this shot, then we can convert that to a true height figure. Searching through the image, the doorway underneath the Likan statue was the best candidate. This doorway will also have the bonus of letting us double check our ceiling height figure from before, as, generally speaking, door heights should only be a little smaller than ceiling heights. Measuring the height of the doorway in this shot against the known height of 2.19 meters for the Toa Metru gives us a height of 4.38 meters. And I have to admit, this was so close to my 4.5 meters for the ceiling height of the Coliseum floors that I got very excited about this when I first worked it out. It's always so cool when separate but related calculations give you similar answers from two very different methods. Going back to the wider shot, the doorway there takes up 10 pixels, meaning that a pixel in this shot represents 0.438 meters of height. Multiplying that by our 1089 pixels from earlier, that gives us a full height of the stadium of 476.98 meters, which equates to 106 floors. So, what we need to do now is work out how much area the Aquilini field and the stands take up, and then make sure we remove 106 floors worth of that from our final floor space calculation to ensure that the stadium is properly accounted for. Returning to our map of Metru Nui, we can see that the stadium seen from above is 35 pixels wide, which translates to around 702.8 meters across, which in turn equates to a circle of 387,930 square meters in area. This means that the entire stadium, including both the Aquilini field itself and the stands that surround it, has roughly the same area as 73 American football fields. Multiplying that by our 106 floors means that we will have to remove about 40.73 square kilometers of area from our final figure. Now that that's finally sorted, let's go back to the matter of the sloped walls of the Coliseum. Given that we know that there are 870 floors, if we assume, for the sake of simplicity, that the slope of the Coliseum's outer walls will remain a constant all the way up, then we therefore also know that the 870th floor will be 870 times smaller than the ground floor. So, all we need to do is remove 1/870th of the ground floor's area for each floor as we go up, and then that will give us the area for every floor. Add them all together and remove our 40.73 square kilometers for the stadium, and that will give us our final value for the full floor space of the Coliseum. Nearly 900 rows of Excel spreadsheet formulae later, we come to our final area value, 1,493.19 square kilometers. Remember our calculation for the land area of the whole city from earlier in the video? That was only 911.42 square kilometers, meaning that the Coliseum's combined floor space is a whole 1.6 times larger than that of Metru Nui itself. In one building, we have enough room for nearly 2 other cities. Now that's what I call impressive. At the start of this investigation, we wanted to see how the Coliseum compared to the most notable buildings here on Earth. I think we can safely say that of all the skyscrapers ever built, nothing even comes close. Then again, while what we have built may fall short, that doesn't mean we haven't dreamt as big. The Exceed 4000 was a concept for a megatall skyscraper that was designed for the city of Tokyo in 1995. At 4 kilometers tall and 6 kilometers wide, it would have been capable of housing 500,000 to 1 million inhabitants over its 800 floors if it were ever to be built. The massive engineering challenges and its potential $1.7 trillion price tag meant that this megastructure was never to be built. But if it had been, its design would have been a very familiar sight to any Bionicle fan. Happy Bionicle Day, everyone. Thank you for joining me today, and I hope I'll see you again soon for another Bionicle Science investigation here at the Knowledge Tower.